You brought up Palestine, so let me try to squeeze in. I guess this could be the final big question on the Israel-Palestine conflict. There's an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry David falls in love with this Palestinian fried chicken restaurant. And later, when that restaurant tries to move next to a Jewish deli, he's conflicted because he has to pick between the fried chicken and this woman that he met there and his people because he's Jewish. And you've said in the past that this is where the conflict lies for a lot of people. It no longer lies with the myth of the Masada or the reality of the Holocaust, as it probably did before the Six-Day War in 67 or before the Oslo Accords in 93. Back then, those narratives probably held a lot more weight. So what holds more weight now? Where does the debate lie now? And I ask this question with an eye on the future. How do we finally solve this conflict and hopefully bring some semblance of peace into the region?
Well, firstly, you're a very clever interviewer because Larry David's show, Curb Your Enthusiasm, is one of my favorite shows. And that episode is one that I tell everybody to watch because it is such a smart stand-up of the petty prejudices that people hold around an area of the world that is so distant from their own lives. I mean, they're fighting over a strip mall in LA. There are real people who are really suffering in a place that is so far from their reality. I think that's a brilliant way in which Larry David captures the absurdity of the kind of support people have, for Israel or whatever. Anyway, your question is extremely meaningful and hard because, again, there are millions of people who are going to have to come to some understanding with each other. Israel is not a country that is going to be able to exist in the shape that it does now. It has become exceedingly intolerant to its own Palestinian minority that lives within the boundaries of 1948 Israel, for which human rights organizations have called it an apartheid state. It continues to occupy the Palestinians of the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, having flattened all of Gaza, 2.3 million people rendered without a home. And it doesn't allow the Palestinians in exile to come back to their lands, which was a UN resolution. Resolution 242, which is completely violated. This combination of apartheid, occupation, and latterly this genocide in Gaza has, I think, really put a question before Israel, not the Palestinians. The question before Israel is, how do Israelis want to live? Do they want to continue to live with second-class citizens in their borders, with an occupation that is marked, it's not a term that I'm using prejudiciously. It's a UN term. The UN designates these three parts, East Jerusalem, West Bank, and Gaza, as the occupied Palestinian territory. Do they want to live like that? Is this how they want to live? Or do they want to actually live with one state, with all the people in the area within that state? By the way, this is a question I would ask to the current Indian government. What's the point of the Citizenship Amendment Act? You have an enormous population of Muslims within India, enormous, much larger than the population of Palestine and Israel combined. What are you trying to do with these kind of bills? What message are you sending to people, who live within the boundaries of India? India as an idea was always supposed to be an idea of diversity, not an idea of intolerance and singularity. Similarly, can there be a state in West Asia which is marked by the complexity of old Jerusalem? With Armenians, with Jews, with Arabs of different kinds, with Palestinians, and so on. The richness of the whole Levant. You go to Aleppo, the richness of that city, the breadth of it. It takes us back to the beginning, which is Beirut. I lived in Beirut, loved the city, also a complicated city. It's interesting how the wheel turns. Yeah. In the center of Beirut, there's a synagogue. It's the old synagogue of Beirut. This synagogue was funded by the Sassoon family. Now, the Sassoons are a family from Iraq that left a long time ago as traders. One part of them went to France, where one of their descendants was Vidal Sassoon, the famous Vidal Sassoon. Another branch of the Sassoon family, Baghdadi Jews, went to Calcutta and they set up shop in Calcutta. It was the Calcutta Sassoon family that paid for the building of the synagogue in Beirut. And when I was there in the 2000s, 2013, that period, 14, when I was there in that period, I visited the synagogue. It was being rebuilt. And I asked people, why is it being rebuilt? Well, interestingly, it was being rebuilt and financed by Hezbollah, because Hezbollah was making an argument that they have no problem with Jews living in Lebanon, because Jews had already and always lived in Beirut. They wanted to welcome Jews back to Beirut. I found that fascinating. That is the future of humanity, living in our complicated, multiple existences. I don't want to live in an ethno-nationalist world. I'm an Indian. I live in Santiago, Chile. There are people in Santiago from Haiti, from Venezuela, from Bolivia. I want to live in a multi-ethnic, multi world, multi cuisine. I want more Mexicans here because I miss Mexican food. There's an Indian guy called Sanjay who sells samosas on the street, on next to one of my favorite restaurants. I mean, I like the complexity. Why do we need ethno-nationalist countries? Why do you need a Hindu Rashtra or a Jewish state? Why can't you have a complex state? It's bizarre that there are people who live in the United States, which is, at one level has a history of being multiple, who are raising money for Hindu Rashtras and raising money for a Jewish state. I mean, for God's sake, you enjoy the complexity of New York. Why are you raising money not to allow complexity in other countries?
This reminds me of a poem by Jigar Muradabadi, who had said, क्या कयामत है कि इस दौरे तरक्की में जिगर आदमी से आदमी का हक अदा होता नहीं.